Hi, welcome to this episode of Why Golf Geography. Today we're looking at the tab Geography, so tab the absolute basics, the urban issues and challenges, section 3, a case study of a UK city which is going to be Stoke-on-Trent. Here we've got the tab Geography sheet for the Stoke-on-Trent topic. This has got all the key information about our topic here about Stoke-on-Trent. If you know the things on this sheet, then you'll be okay. As long as your literacy skills, your explaining skills, your argument skills are pretty good, all the data on here is pretty much all you need to know. And if you want to pause at this point and just review these key points, then feel free. Here we've got tab pictures, and these pictures represent what's been on the previous slide. So if you'd rather look at pictures rather than the information in the text, then feel free to pause at this point just to review the key points in this slide. Now here's the overview. So if you're thinking you're okay with the tab pictures and the tab information, then you've got some headings here. Can you remember what goes with each one of these headings? So for example, the overview. Why is Stoke-on-Trent important at a national and international scale? The migration, positives and negatives, and so on. So can you remember what the pictures were about? Can you remember what the informations were? The key pieces of data, the key topic headings. Here's some questions, and these are the basic questions, so if you know the answers to these already, perfect, and then you can just feel free to carry on and watch this video, or you might choose to do the questions again at the end, and at the end we'll show you these questions again. Now to test yourself, again we've got some headings, and all we've done is taken the tab geography information away from this, so can you fill in the information from these headings? And the final challenge before we go into the main part of this video is, could you fill in this mind map without any headings, without any information? What can you remember? When we're looking at any place, it's always good to locate the place first. So you can see that Stoke-on-Trent is located within the United Kingdom. The map on the left hand side shows the United Kingdom as a whole, and you've got the dark green areas, and that shows the West Midlands. And in the West Midlands there's a number of different counties, so this is a middle map. So Staffordshire, Shropshire, Warwickshire, Worcestershire, and all those counties. And Stoke-on-Trent is located in the northern area of Staffordshire. So you know that Stoke-on-Trent sometimes is referred to as the North Staffs area. We've zoomed in again on the right hand side map, and you can see Stoke-on-Trent. That dark blue area defines where Stoke-on-Trent is. So there's the 6 towns: Tunstall, Burslem, Hanley, Stoke, Fenton and Longton. It's got a population of about 260,000, plus to the west we have Newcastle-under-Lyme, and that's got a population of about 130,000. So in the North Staffordshire conurbation, so the built up area of North Staffordshire, there's a total population of about 390,000. Here we're looking at the importance of Stoke-on-Trent in terms of its transport links. So Stoke-on-Trent has got excellent transport links. So to the west of Stoke-on-Trent is the M6 motorway. That gives us access to Manchester and beyond to the north, and Birmingham to the south and areas beyond that. Also, the A50 links Stoke-on-Trent to the East Midlands and the M1, and giving access to the eastern parts of the country. These excellent transport links mean that lots of distribution warehouses, such as Screwfix and Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer's, they have located their distribution warehouses in Stoke-on-Trent because it's easy to get goods to other parts of the country. Also, the excellent train links. That means that we can get to London, the capital, in about an hour and 35 minutes on some of the fastest trains going out of Stoke-on-Trent. And that gives flexibility in terms of business and commerce and trade, and people getting to there for tourist attractions as well. Stoke-on-Trent is important at a national and an international scale. So nationally, a lot of students in the UK come to Keele University. There's about 10,000 students in Keele University, and about 15,000 students go to Staffordshire University to study. So that's important in the UK. Internationally, Huge numbers of international students also come to the city to study, because education is one of those products that the UK has got that's got international renown, and people want to come to the UK to be educated in our universities. Stoke-on-Trent is also important at an international scale and national scale due to its pottery industry, the heritage, the history of pottery. So there's lots of brands that are famous locally, picked out two here, which is Wedgwood and Port Miriam. And people internationally want to see the brand or the back stamp saying made in Stoke-on-Trent because of the heritage associated with that. That employs lots of people in Stoke-on-Trent. Still about 7,000 people work in the pottery industry in Stoke-on-Trent. Up to about 7,500, it's thought, in different areas locally. Also, ceramics is a huge area for research as well, because it has got many different uses due to its properties. So in the image on the bottom right, you can see even in dentures and microchips and tiles and bricks, ceramics is used. And on electricity pylons, the things that hold the cables, they're made out of ceramics due to the properties of not transmitting the electricity supply into the pylon tower. So those are made out of ceramics too. So internationally and nationally, the ceramic industry, the pottery industry, is important in Stoke-on-Trent. More recently, Stoke-on-Trent's become important in terms of the archaeological dig regarding the Staffordshire hoard. So a few years ago, in a field in South Staffordshire, a number of items were dug up from Anglo-Saxon period. This has been split between Stoke-on-Trent museums and Birmingham museums, and huge amounts of information is now being gleaned from these items and reconstructed. So again, that's important nationally to find out about our past, and also internationally how these groups of people interacted with different parts of the world. We're now looking at migration. So migration is simply the movement of people from one place to another. At any one time, it's thought there's about 26,000 people in Stoke-on-Trent who are what's called non-UK born. So they might have been born in a different place, whether that be the EU or whether that be wider afield. Through migration, there's lots of people that think there's positives of migration. So the positives of migration is bringing in new skills. So maybe some of our service industries like the NHS. Also bringing in different types of supermarkets, so accessing goods that we wouldn't have previously been familiar with. Also different types of foods, maybe Chinese restaurants, Indian restaurants, and more type of EU restaurants that are now opening up. Also, it shows an understanding of different places and different cultures and how different people live, and all those things together are a positive of migration. However, in all aspects of geography, where there's a positive, there's also a negative. It can be perceived that when there's uncontrolled migration and it affects people's lives possibly in a negative way, or perceives that it's affecting people's lives in a negative way, then there might be conflicts. So there might be a thought that there's increased pressure on services. So the NHS, for example, more people visiting the hospitals. There might be an increase on pressure in schools. So people who might come from a different country, speaking a different language, and might need extra support. So that might be an extra cost for schools. So in geography, there's always a positive, there's always a negative. In Stoke-on-Trent, we've got excellent facilities for recreation. So recreation is what you do in your spare time for enjoyment. So we've got things for children. So for example, Waterworld. We've got things for people who like the outdoors. So the Peak District National Park is located to the northeast of Stoke-on-Trent, not far away. We've got the Trentham Estate for days out, and also in terms of our heritage, our history, Gladstone Pottery Museum, and the list goes on and on and on. Here's just 4 examples we've picked out today. We're now looking at entertainment. So entertainment is an event or a performance designed to entertain people. So there's different things here that would entertain people. So the theatres locally, so for example the Regent Theatre, some of the football clubs, so Port Vale and Stoke City. Also, you've got the Trentham Estate that often puts in lots of concerts in the summertime. So that's twice we've mentioned Trentham Estate, once in recreation, once in entertainment. It just depends on the purpose of the visit. We're looking at some background information now about the employment structure. Employment structure is basically just what types of jobs do people do. There's 4 types of jobs. There's primary, there's secondary, there's tertiary and quaternary. So primary jobs are those jobs where there's raw materials extracted from the earth or the sea. So that might be fishing, forestry, farming. We've got secondary jobs. These are where the raw materials are used to manufacture or make things. So for example, a car maker would be a secondary job. We have tertiary industries. They provide a service, so you're doing something for somebody else. So maybe cleaner or teacher or doctor, supermarket worker. Then we have quaternary. They're what's called knowledge-based industries. So for example, science and research, they would be quaternary jobs. The different types of jobs, they've changed over time. So they've changed over time. You can see here, pre-industrial, in the 1800s, there'd be lots of primary jobs. In effect, most of those primary jobs would be farming, so that'd be agriculture, so people would be eating the food that they have produced. So that'd be before the 1800s, the agricultural revolution, and those have slowly decreased over time. Secondary jobs, they were quite low, and then they've increased in the Industrial Revolution, where lots of people moved to the cities to work in factories, and then over time, more recently, they've decreased. Tertiary jobs have slowly increased over time, so service jobs. And if you think about people that you know, probably most of them work in a service job. There might be 1 or 2 in secondary jobs, and occasionally someone will know someone in a primary job if they live in a city. More recently, quaternary jobs have come on track, so that's in terms of research and science, development of knowledge-based industries, and those are likely to increase again in the future. In any place there are housing inequalities. That just means there's housing differences in a city. Not everybody will live in the same type of house. So you can see here, we've got on the top left, we've got terraced housing. That's where all the houses are next to each other, kind of stuck to each other. You have semi-detached housing, so you might have 2 houses stuck to each other. And then you have detached housing, so the house is separate. You kind of walk all the way around the house and it's not attached to another house. At the bottom, you've got what's called the Burgess model. So the Burgess model, a sociologist called E.W. Burgess in the 1930s, he came up with an idea or a model. And he thought that he'd noticed a lot of similarities between different cities. In the centre was the Central Business District, the CBD, and the further you went out, the housing changed. So, outside of the CBD would be a zone of factories. Then you would find terraced houses, because that's where the factory workers would live, who went to the factories, who would walk to the factories. Then into war, between the First World War and Second World War, a lot of semi-detached housing would be built. Then, more recently, more detached housing is built. So, in a city, there's going to be different types of houses. One of the issues in a city is when some of the terraced houses become derelict near to the city centre. In Stoke-on-Trent, there's been a £1 house scheme developed. The £1 house scheme, that's been developed by the City Council. You give the City Council £1 and they will sell you a house. In reality, you've probably actually got to give them about £30,000. So you'll take a loan from the City Council, about £30,000. They'll do up the house for you. So new electrics, new plumbing, get it all sorted, check the roof, and that'll be the cost of doing up the house. And you will then pay that loan back. But effectively, you've still got a really fantastic house that's recently been done up for £1. Now the reason for doing that is to start to build communities. So a lot of streets where there's derelict houses and people haven't lived there for a while, there's broken communities, and the local council wants to rebuild communities. So there's then a sense of place and people feel a belonging, a pride in their street again. And then over time these communities get built up, and that's the main reason behind the £1 house scheme. The £1 house scheme is mainly open to maybe lower paid workers, and you've got to stay in the house for a certain amount of time. And also if you move, you've then got to pay some of the profits back to the council. So there are some limits on it, but it's been very, very successful in Stoke-on-Trent in rebuilding communities. In Stoke-on-Trent, as with all cities, there's inequalities in education. So that's differences in education. In Stoke-on-Trent, about 37% of people have no GCSEs. And also there's limited choices, so some schools locally are fee paying, so that limits the choices. Some schools locally are faith-based schools, so there might be criteria to get into the school as well. So there's inequalities, there's differences in accessing education. Also in Stoke-on-Trent, only about 15% of people have a degree level qualification, as opposed to the UK, which on average is about 27%. So you can see that is a little bit lower. So not just within the city are there inequalities, but also between the UK and Stoke-on-Trent there are also inequalities. Here we've got some information about what's called Brownfield and Greenfield sites. So just background information, Brownfield sites are those that have been used before. So there might have been a factory on the site, whereas Greenfield sites are ones that haven't been built on before. That's the definition. Now, as in geography, there's always positives, there's always negatives for both. So Brownfield sites, it's great to reuse places that are near to the city centre so it doesn't look derelict. So that is good. Also, there's good transport links there already. However, depending what the site has been used for, maybe the site has to be cleared up. There's toxic material in the ground if there was a factory there that released toxic material. Greenfield sites, they don't cost a lot of money to set up because you're just removing the topsoil and you're then building on it. However, you're thinking then about removing farmland which produces food. Then you're also thinking about once you've put houses on that land, people who live in the houses, they're going to travel to work, be commuters, they're releasing CO2 into the atmosphere, travelling further to work. So there's positives and there's negatives for both, and the balance is what do you do? And if you keep building on greenfield sites, your city is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. However, a lot of people do prefer to live in greenfield areas rather than brownfield areas in the centre of cities. Depends on the type of group of people. So we've just looked at brownfield and greenfield sites, and the greenfield sites particularly that we're looking at are those at the rural urban fringe, the ones at the edge of the city. So rural, that's countryside; urban, that's the cities, that's the built up areas; and the fringe just means edge. So should you be building at the edge of cities? In effect, people say it's okay, it's just a little bit more, but then the next year comes, you build a little bit more, next year comes, you'll build a little bit more, and then your city gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that creates what's called urban sprawl. Your city gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and people on the outside have to travel an awful long way to get into the city centre if they work in the city centre. So should you be developing these areas or not? In our city, looking at waste and recycling, the vast majority of cities around the UK have different coloured bins for different types of waste. So in Stoke-on-Trent, the recyclable waste goes into the blue bin, the garden waste goes into the brown bin, and the non-recyclable waste goes into the grey bin. There can be newspapers into the little tub as well. So that's our recycling system. Also, there's recycling centres in the city. So recycling centres in the city, one in the north between Tunstall and Burslem, and one in the south in Handford, and that's where larger items can be taken for being recycled. So we've got pretty good recycling systems. The difficulty is, if people don't use this correctly, then any waste that goes into the wrong bin, that contaminates the waste and means that then it can't be recycled. One of the issues in terms of waste and recycling is the issue of fly tipping. So this is often around criminal gangs who will take away people's waste, charge some money, and then actually they don't dispose of it correctly and just dump it somewhere on the side of a road or in a field. However, that costs the council about £500,000 a year to clean up. So £500,000 to clean up fly tipping, and that's money that isn't then spent on essential services like education and health and social care. One of the aims of the local council is something called urban greening, and that's making access to parks and green space, making that provided for all people in the city, because it's good for health, it's good for mental health to be able to access green space. One of the examples here is the urban greening project in Hanley Park. So £5.8 million has been spent in Hanley Park, doing it back up again, restoring some of the natural features, restoring some of the previous Victorian monuments in the park, also opening up a new cafe and just making it an awful lot nicer so that more people use this area. So that's urban greening, so greening the areas in urban or city areas. We're looking here at a regeneration project in Stoke-on-Trent. So we're looking specifically at Hanley, and a lot of things over the last few years have happened in Hanley and continue to happen to make sure regeneration is taking place. Regeneration just means making the place a little bit better. Now, it was needed because for many years there was no investment, there were shop closures, many areas became derelict. So the local council started to move so that lots of different areas of the city centre are being regenerated. We've got, on the top left, we've got the Smithfield development. So in there, a lot of the council services are in there, the police station's in there, it's got some of the library services in there, and also next to that is going to be a hotel, and there's going to be an apartment complex as well. So that regenerates that area of Hanley. Another area of Hanley is where the new Tesco is, and near to that is a Premier Inn and Costa Coffee and Brewers Fayre. So those kind of things have regenerated that area, and the hotel also attracts people to the area. It means people want to stay in the area and visit our attractions. It seems also to be popular because very recently there's been an extension built on the hotel. The Pottery shopping centre, the Into shopping centre in Hanley, that's recently had an extension, and that is called the Hive Complex. So it's got a new cinema, it's got restaurants, and that is really popular with different people bringing people into the city centre at night, people who might not have otherwise come to the city centre. So that cost about £20 million to develop. Also, you've got the bus station. The bus station, that cost about £15 million to develop, because the previous one, that was run down and quite derelict, and people didn't want to come to the city centre, often because of the issues around the bus station and antisocial behaviour. All of these come together, which makes the city centre just a little bit nicer than it was, and if tourists come into the area and visiting our attractions, then that brings money to the local economy. Here again we've got the images, so these are all the images that we've used in the video today, so glance over those, pause at this point if you want to review any. And all of the images, those relate to the information on this slide here. Can you remember, when you looked at each one of these things here, can you remember the image that was shown, the positives and negatives of migration? Can you remember the images of recreation and entertainment? Can you remember the different images of education? So see if you can remember which images went to each one of these. And finally, can you now answer these questions? I think quite a lot you would have been able to answer before because you live here, therefore you know all about Stoke-on-Trent. Can you answer these questions? Just pause at this point to see if you can.